Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the narrow, lantern-lit streets of Edo-era Japan, that's 17th to 19th century Tokyo. For those keeping score, where the air is thick with the mingling scents of roasted tea, river mist, and wood smoke. You trudge along uneven cobblestones, the soft glow of paper lanterns flickering as a warm breeze stirs the edge of your kimono. Yes, you're dressed for the occasion, looking like a proper townsfolk out for an evening amble. And as your eyes adjust to the dusky light, you notice cats everywhere, lounging in shop doorways, twining between the legs of passersby, perched like little emperors on windowsills. You've just entered one of Edo's famous cat alleys, where cats outnumber people and where a trip for tea might turn into a cuddle session with the town's most pampered felines. You probably won't survive this. I mean, you'll be too distracted by the cuteness to notice if a stray samurai challenges you to a duel. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far our little history sleep club reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a slow breath as you wander deeper into the alley, the chatter of merchants fading into a background lull. The clink of porcelain cups, the low thrum of a distant shamisen, everything conspires to make you feel like you've stepped straight into a woodblock print. There's something magical here. Cats, with their sleek fur and knowing eyes, move with the calm arrogance of creatures who understand they're revered. You pause as one particularly plump calico stretches luxuriously across a tammy mat laid at the entrance of a small shop. The sign above reads, in careful brushstrokes, something like Neko no Ochaya, Cat Tea House. This isn't the flashy kind of establishment reserved for samurai or nobles. No, this is the domain of merchants, artisans, and travelers, all drawn by the promise of tea served alongside furry companionship. Historians still argue whether these cat-friendly tea spots were formal businesses or more like cozy, informal gatherings at certain shops that became known for their feline residents. Either way, the effect is the same. You're beckoned inside by both human and cat alike. As you slide open the wooden door, a small bell chimes, and immediately, two cats come to investigate the newcomer. One is a slender gray creature with one ear nicked, perhaps from a youthful scuffle, and the other a grand white tom sporting what looks suspiciously like a red silk ribbon tied into a jaunty bow. The air inside smells of toasted rice tea and cedar wood, with just a hint of fish. A cheerful voice greets you, the owner, a man in his 50s with laugh lines around his eyes and a tiny kitten poking its head out of his sleeve. Welcome, traveler. Choose your cushion. The cats already have their favorites, but perhaps they'll make room for you. He chuckles, motioning to a low table where a tabby dozes, completely unfazed by your arrival. You settle onto a cushion, legs folding beneath you as you take in the room. The walls are decorated with ink paintings of cats, some playful, some dignified, and one rather questionable attempt at a cat that honestly looks more like a weasel. A shelf near the back holds small porcelain dishes, each carefully labeled with a cat's name written in delicate kanji. Clearly, these cats are not just pets. They're family, employees, and mascots all in one. Outside, a trio of boys chases a kitten down the street, their laughter mixing with the occasional bark of a dog or creak of a cart's wheels. The energy of the city pulses beyond the walls, but here, in this snug tea house, the world narrows to the slow pour of tea and the sound of a cat's steady purr. The shopkeeper returns with a tray, a small pot of tea, a single sweet rice cake, and, amusingly, a saucer of fish bits. For our guests, he winks. You're not entirely sure if he means you or the cats. The cats, of course, assume it's for them. The white tom immediately claims the fish, while the gray one curls up beside your knee, his purring so loud you can feel the vibrations through the tatami. You sip your tea, the warmth spreading through you, and let yourself sink into the gentle rhythm of the place. Here's a fun tidbit. During the Edo period, it wasn't uncommon for shops to keep cats as both pest control and companions. But some tea houses like this one became locally famous precisely because their cats were so well loved and well cared for. There are even records of certain shop cats receiving little silk collars, sometimes with bells or tiny charms, crafted by the same artisans who made accessories for children or pets of the nobility. And of course, there were always the skeptics. Some neighbors whispered that having so many cats in one spot was inviting bad luck, or at the very least fleas. Historians still argue whether these cat tea spots were truly a widespread phenomenon or more of a charming niche found only in certain districts. You stretch your legs, careful not to disturb your new feline friend, and glance toward the door. Outside, the alley glows soft gold in the lantern light. Another cat struts by, this one jet black, with eyes that glint like polished amber. It pauses, as if weighing the worth of entering, then continues on, tail high. You can't help but grin. Welcome to Edo, where even the cats have somewhere important to be. The soft rustle of the sliding door marks the arrival of another guest, and you glance up, half expecting to see a merchant or maybe a traveling actor looking for a quiet cup of tea. But no, it's a cat. A big ginger fellow with tufts of fur sticking out from his ears, and the swagger of someone who knows this is his domain. He saunters in like he owns the place, because in a way, he probably does. Gives you a slow blink, a cat's version of a polite nod, and leaps gracefully onto the windowsill, where he promptly curls into a perfect fluffy circle. You sip your tea again, the earthy bitterness balanced by the faint sweetness of the rice cake. The shopkeeper returns, his sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms dusted with flour. "Ah, you've met Maru," he says, nodding toward the ginger cat. "He's the true master here. I just serve the tea." He chuckles, and you catch the twinkle of affection in his eyes. Outside, the murmur of Edo life continues, the clatter of geta sandals on stone, the soft call of a tofu seller, the distant thump of drums from a festival you can't see. But inside, the world slows to the rhythm of the cats. One of them, a slender tortoiseshell, hops lightly onto the table, sniffing your empty saucer before deciding your cup might be worth investigating. She peers into it with wide eyes, then decides tea isn't her thing and retreats, tail held high, as if to say, "I was just being polite." You lean back, the tatami mat pleasantly firm beneath you, and let yourself observe. This tea house isn't grand or ornate, no gilded screens or lacquered pillars, but there's charm in its simplicity. The low tables are rubbed smooth by years of elbows and teapots. The cushions slightly flattened by countless visitors, human and feline alike. The walls bear the faintest scent of wood smoke and cat fur, the kind of aroma that tells stories. Of hundreds of quiet evenings just like this one, there's a small commotion at the entrance. A pair of travelers, dusty from the road, are coaxing a curious kitten away from the door so they can come inside. The shopkeeper waves them in, offering tea and a place to rest. And as they settle in, one of the travelers, a woman with a woven straw hat slung down her back, reaches into her pack and produces a tiny bundle of dried fish. She offers it to a nearby cat, who sniffs it with great ceremony before deigning to accept. The owner notices your interest. Ah yes, many come here not just for tea but for the cats. Travelers, merchants, even scribes looking for inspiration. He gestures to the shelf lined with little porcelain dishes, some chipped, some pristine. Each cat has its own bowl, and most have their own stories. See that one there, with the notch in his ear? He once chased off a dog twice his size. Saved my best teapot from a messy end. Historians still argue whether these tea houses were the inspiration for modern cat cafes, or if the connection is more romantic invention than direct lineage. But sitting here, with the cats weaving through the room like silent, graceful hosts. It's easy to believe you're witnessing the birth of an idea that would one day become a global trend. The shopkeeper pours himself a cup of tea and settles onto a cushion opposite you, his voice lowering as if sharing a secret. You know, some say the cats choose the guests. If they like you, they'll sit with you. If not, he shrugs, smiling. Well, there's always another tea house down the street. A gust of wind stirs the paper lanterns outside, casting shifting patterns of light across the floorboards. The tortoiseshell returns, this time curling up beside your hip, her purrs a low, steady hum that blends with the soft clink of cups and the murmur of voices. Here's a little-known tidbit. In some quarters of Edo, it was believed that a cat's presence in a shop brought good luck, not just in terms of customers, but in warding off misfortune. There are even woodblock prints from the period, showing cats seated proudly beside shop signs or perched atop storehouses, as if they were official guardians of commerce. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sounds and scents of the place wash over you. The faint bitterness of tea on your tongue, the soft weight of the cat at your side, the creak of wood as the wind nudges the building. It all folds together into a kind of quiet symphony. And then, from somewhere behind the counter, a soft meow, a kitten's high, questioning voice. The shopkeeper rises, his expression fond and a little exasperated. "Excuse me, one of the little ones has found the rice bin again." He disappears behind a curtain, leaving you with the cats and the comforting hush of the tea house. Outside, the night deepens and the alley glows with the warmth of 100 lanterns. The cats settle in, their eyelids heavy, their breathing slow. And you too feel yourself drawn into their world, a world of soft fur, warm tea, and the gentle passage of time. The soft patting of paws alerts you to a new presence at your side. A young tabby with bright, inquisitive eyes and a tail that curls like a question mark. He sniffs at your sleeve, perhaps intrigued by the scent of the rice cake, or perhaps just making his rounds, inspecting the guests like a diligent little host. His fur is clean and glossy, and as you reach out, he permits a gentle scratch behind the ears before hopping onto a windowsill to survey his domain. "Ah, that's Tama," comes the familiar voice of the shopkeeper, who has returned from rescuing his rice bin. He's new, still learning the ways of the tea house. He chuckles, brushing a stray bit of rice flour from his sleeve. But give him time. Every cat here has their own place, their own rhythm. You glance around the room, realizing just how true that is. The ginger Tom still dozes on the windowsill, utterly unbothered by the world. The tortoise shell beside you now dreams, her whiskers twitching at imagined prey. And in the corner, a pair of cats, one black, one white, sit side by side like yin and yang, gazing out at the alley as if guarding it with silent vigilance. The shopkeeper settles onto a cushion near the hearth, a pot of tea warming beside him. "You know," he begins, his voice low and easy, "my father started this tea house, but it was my mother who brought in the cats. She said no tea tastes as good without the company of a cat." He smiles at the memory, eyes soft with nostalgia. People come here not just for the tea, but for them, for the warmth, the stories, the quiet companionship. And indeed, the cats are more than just pets. They're woven into the very fabric of the place. You notice now the tiny silk collars, some red, some blue, a few decorated with miniature bells that tinkle softly as their wearers move. These aren't just adornments. In Edo, such collars signified that a cat was claimed, loved, and protected. Historians still argue whether these collars were purely ornamental or served a more practical purpose, like distinguishing shop cats from strays. Either way, they're part of the charm, part of the ritual of the cat tea house. The door creaks open again, and this time it's a young man in a merchant's robe, carrying a lacquered box under one arm. He bows politely to the shopkeeper, then to you, and takes a seat at the far table. As he unpacks his box, you glimpse tiny trinkets, carved mice, painted fans, a little brush for calligraphy. But it's the cats who are most interested, gathering around him like moths to a flame. The merchant laughs softly, offering a carved mouse to one bold kitten, who bats at it with eager paws. "This is the best place to test my wares," the merchant explains, noticing your gaze. "If a cat likes it, surely a child or a lady will too." He winks as if sharing a trade secret. And you can't help but smile. In Edo, cats aren't just companions. They're consultants, muses, and occasionally business partners. Here's a curious tidbit. Some shopkeepers in Edo train their cats, or at least encourage them, to perform little tricks for customers. Nothing elaborate, mind you. A cat that would roll over on command, or one that would leap onto a specific cushion when called, could delight visitors and entice them to linger and spend more. Outside, the alley grows quieter as the night deepens. The festival drums have faded, replaced by the soft trickle of water from a nearby fountain. The cats inside the tea house seem to sense the change, settling into their chosen spots, their eyes half-lidded in contentment. The ginger Tom lifts his head briefly, surveying the room, then sighs, if a cat can sigh, and resumes his nap. Notice now a low shelf near the hearth, lined with small scrolls and folded papers. The shopkeeper sees your interest. "Ah, those are poems. Some from visitors, some from my family, all inspired by the cats." He reaches for one, unrolling it with care. The calligraphy is delicate, the ink slightly faded. He reads it aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. Asterisk in the tea steam per ampere. Cat's whiskers twitch softly. Evening drifts away. Asterisk. It's simple, yet perfect. The kind of haiku that captures a moment and holds it still, like a pressed flower in a book. Historians still argue whether poetry nights at tea houses were formal gatherings or more spontaneous affairs, sparked by the quiet beauty of an evening just like this. But tonight here, it feels as natural as breathing. You let your eyes close for a moment, the warmth of the tea and the gentle sounds of the tea house lulling you deeper into the atmosphere. The cats, the lantern light, the scent of cedar and tea, it all wraps around you like a soft, familiar blanket. And outside, the night stretches on, as endless and comforting as a cat's purr. The tea has gone lukewarm in your cup, but you don't mind. The slow pace of the evening has worked its spell on you, and even the cats seem to move in a kind of dreamy dance now, padding softly across the floorboards, curling into tighter balls of fur, stretching with languid grace as if the very air in the tea house is infused with serenity. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the tortoiseshell still dozing beside you, and take in the scene with fresh eyes. This place isn't quite what you'd expect if someone told you it was a cat cafe. There are no formal menus listing petting times or special treats for the cats. Instead, it's more of a tea house where cats have claimed squatters' rights, and the humans have simply agreed to coexist under their watchful gaze. You realize now that what makes this space special isn't a business model, but a relationship between people, cats, and community. The shopkeeper, seeing your thoughtful expression, smiles as he refills your cup with fresh, steaming tea. "These cats," he says softly, "they make this place whole. Without them, it's just wood and stone." He gestures toward a trio of customers at a neighboring table. An elderly woman, a middle-aged man with ink-stained fingers, and a young girl clutching a doll. See, they come for tea, yes. But more, they come for the company, for the peace that only a cat can give, and it's true. The little girl giggles as a kitten bats at the frayed edge of her sleeve. The man, likely a scribe or a clerk, absent-mindedly strokes the head of a cat sprawled across his lap as he jots notes with a brush. The elderly woman sips her tea slowly, one hand resting on the back of a tabby who has claimed her cushion as shared territory. Here's a historical fact that might surprise you. In Edo, tea houses were often social hubs, not just places to grab a quick cup. They were where news was exchanged, deals were struck, and friendships were kindled over steaming bowls of matcha. In the case of these cat-friendly tea houses, the cats themselves became part of the draw, a gentle furry icebreaker that eased conversations and soothed weary souls. The shopkeeper leans in a little, his voice conspiratorial. "You know, we have regulars who say they come for the tea, but I think they just don't want to admit they come to see a particular cat. There's a merchant from the next ward who swears by my green tea, but I always see him sneaking scraps to that greedy white Tom over there." He laughs quietly, not unkindly. Historians still argue whether these tea houses with cats were a deliberate business strategy or simply evolved because cats were so common in the city, kept to control mice and rats. But whatever the origin, the result is the same, a warm, inviting space where the lines between customer and cat servant blur delightfully. You shift again, drawn by the sound of a low, rhythmic tapping. At the back of the tea house, an old man has unrolled a scroll and is composing a haiku, the brush in his hand moving with slow precision. His subject? A kitten asleep in a basket, paws twitching as it chases dreams. You wonder if the poem will capture the exact magic of this moment, the stillness, the soft sound of breathing, the faint creak of the building as it settles for the night. And then there's a gentle commotion at the door. A pair of young women enters, both dressed in simple but neat kimonos, their cheeks pink from the night air. They remove their sandals and bow, exchanging greetings with the shopkeeper before choosing a table near yours. One of them carries a small cloth bundle, which she carefully unwraps to reveal, to your mild astonishment, a tiny silk cushion, embroidered with the figure of a cat. She sets it beside her, and soon enough, a curious kitten climbs onto it, as if this had been the plan all along. It's not uncommon, the shopkeeper murmurs, for customers to bring small offerings or comforts for their favorite cats. After all, these cats are part of the community, as much as any neighbor or friend. And sometimes, these small gestures are repaid in the way that only cats can, with a blink, a purr, or the simple grace of shared presence. A quirky tidbit for you: some Edo tea houses were known to display wooden plaques or painted signs with images of their most famous cats, almost like mascots. These weren't just advertisements, they were declarations of pride, symbols of the house's character and charm. As the night deepens, the tea house seems to grow warmer, the light from the lantern softer, more golden. The cats settle into their places as if by unspoken agreement, and the guests do the same, lulled by the quiet, the tea, and the steady company of their feline hosts. You breathe it in, the mingled sense of cedar, tea, and fur, and feel the weight of the day slip from your shoulders. Outside, the city hums on, but here, in this little haven of cats and quiet, time seems to slow, stretching like a cat in a patch of morning sun. And you, too, are part of that stillness now. A low murmur of conversation drifts from the neighboring table, where the merchant with ink-stained fingers now chats amiably with the two young women who entered earlier. You catch snippets, talk of trade routes, a new bridge under construction, and inevitably, a mention of the ginger Tom who has resumed his post on the windowsill, blinking lazily at the world outside. His presence, it seems, is as much a part of the tea house's charm as the tea itself. The shopkeeper joins you once more, this time carrying a small wooden tray with an assortment of little dishes. "For the cats," he says with a wink, setting it down gently. The cats, of course, know the routine. They gather not greedily, but with a kind of polite expectancy, as if aware of their status as honored guests. You watch as they delicately nibble at dried fish, a few scraps of eel skin, and what looks like minced chicken. The shopkeeper chuckles softly. "A feast for kings, eh? But they earn it, more than you'd think." He gestures toward the shadows near the rafters. "Without them, this place would be overrun by mice. And believe me, the cats know it. In Edo, cats were prized not just for their companionship, but for their practical value in controlling pests. The city's tightly packed wooden buildings were a haven for rodents, and cats played a vital role in keeping food stores and paper goods safe from hungry teeth. But in places like this tea house, their value went beyond utility. They were symbols of prosperity, of a shopkeeper's care and attention. And yet, as always, there's debate. Historians still argue whether the rise of cat keeping in urban Edo was primarily about pest control, or whether it reflected deeper shifts in culture, an emerging appreciation for leisure, comfort, and the small joys of domestic life. A soft chime from the door announces another visitor, this time a woman draped in a dark blue kimono, her hair pinned with a single lacquer comb. She carries herself with quiet confidence, and at her heel trots a small, alert cat with striking calico markings. The tea house cats perk up, curious about the newcomer, but none challenge her as she finds a seat. The calico curls at her feet. Watching the room with sharp eyes, you can't help but notice how the woman exchanges a nod with the shopkeeper. Clearly, she's a regular. Perhaps the calico is too. You wonder if the cat has its own dish, its own favorite cushion. Here's a curious detail you might enjoy. During the Edo period, there was a brisk trade in cats themselves. Certain colors and patterns were believed to bring good luck or ward off evil, and a particularly beautiful or well-mannered cat could fetch a handsome price. It wasn't uncommon for merchants, artisans, or even farmers to breed cats as a side business, offering kittens to those seeking a furry charm for their homes or shops. The shopkeeper leans closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. There's a man in the next ward, breeds nothing but bobtail cats, says they're luckier than all the rest, sells them for a small fortune to samurai wives who want to keep their households blessed. He grins, clearly amused. Outside, the city's noises have faded to a gentle hush. The occasional bark of a dog, the creak of a passing cart, distant, softened by the night air. The tea house glows warm and steady, a little island of peace. The cats, having finished their treats, settle once more. The ginger tom stretches luxuriously before resuming his place on the windowsill. The tortoise shell circles twice and curls into a tight spiral beside you. Even the calico visitor relaxes, though she keeps one eye half open, as if making sure the world stays in its proper place. You sip your tea, now perfectly steeped and fragrant, and let your gaze drift over the room. There's something deeply satisfying about the scene. The harmony of people and cats, the quiet comfort of familiar rituals. The merchant at the neighboring table sketches absent-mindedly on a scrap of paper, his subject clearly the calico. And her poised elegance dot, and as you watch, a kitten, small, awkward, all ears and paws, tumbles out from behind a curtain, chased by a crumpled scrap of paper it has clearly been tormenting. The shopkeeper chuckles, rising to gently scoop up the little scamp. "Still learning manners," he says, cradling the kitten in one hand as it bats at his sleeve dot. It's a simple moment, but it stays with you. The way the shopkeeper's rough hands cradle the tiny creature with such care. The way the kitten, fearless and full of life, trusts that it is safe here. And you too feel that safety, that sense of belonging in this small, warm world where tea flows, cats roam, and the night stretches gentle and endless beyond the walls. The soft clink of porcelain brings your attention back to the tea house, as the shopkeeper clears the dishes, his movements practiced and unhurried. The cats watch him with mild interest, as if considering whether it's worth following him back to the kitchen in case something delicious happens to fall. You sip your tea, savoring its warmth, and glance around the room again. Your eye catches on a small charm hanging from one of the wooden beams. A tiny carved cat, its tail curled into a loop with a faded red thread knotted around its neck. "Ah, you noticed that," the shopkeeper says, following your gaze. He sets the tray aside and joins you at the table, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. That charm belonged to my grandmother. She believed it kept evil spirits from crossing our threshold. Said the cats could see what we couldn't, and would keep us safe. The idea of cats as protectors isn't unique to this tea house. Across Edo, and indeed much of Japan, cats were often seen as spiritual guardians. Calico cats in particular were thought to be especially lucky, their tricolored coats seen as powerful symbols against misfortune. You remember the calico who entered with the woman earlier, how the other cats had given way, how the air seemed to hum with quiet respect. Here's a mainstream fact for you. The maneki neko, that little waving cat figurine you've probably seen at restaurants and shops, traces its roots back to the Edo period. Though its exact origin story is murky, historians still argue whether it began at a temple, a shop, or as part of a folk tale. The maneki neko became a beloved symbol of prosperity and protection, its raised paw beckoning good fortune. The shopkeeper rises again and rummages behind the counter, returning with a small lacquered box. He opens it carefully to reveal several old charms, tiny bells, carved wooden cats, folded paper amulets. Customers leave these for the cats, or for the house. Sometimes for luck, sometimes in thanks. They believe the cats watch over them in return, and not everyone agreed, of course. Some townsfolk saw the cats as pests themselves, or at least as unnecessary indulgences. There was an old neighbor, the shopkeeper muses, who used to grumble that my mother's cats brought bad luck. Said their eyes glowed too brightly at night, like little lanterns of ill omen. He moved away though, and his new shop never prospered. Make of that what you will. You shift slightly on your cushion, glancing at the cats as they lounge, wash, or drowse. It's easy to see how their presence could inspire both admiration and unease. Their stillness, their watchful eyes, their uncanny ability to appear and disappear as if slipping between worlds. Outside, the night deepens further. The lanterns in the alley flicker gently in the breeze, their soft light casting dancing shadows across the walls. The tea house feels like a bubble suspended in time, untouched by the bustle of the city beyond. A gentle chime at the door signals another visitor, this time a fortune teller draped in layers of dark fabric, her hair silvered with age. She carries a small cage, though its door hangs open, and inside perches a bird, a finch, bright-eyed and curious. The cats glance up but make no move toward the newcomer. Perhaps they sense that this creature is under the fortune teller's protection. Woman settles at a corner table and exchanges a few words with the shopkeeper, who brings her tea. She notices your gaze and smiles, lifting her cup in a silent toast. A good tea house keeps many guardians, she says softly, as if picking up your train of thought. Cats, charms, kind hearts. They all weave together to keep the dark at bay. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Edo-era households and shops hung small straw effigies of cats over their doors, believing these figures would confuse or frighten away malicious spirits. These weren't elaborate or expensive, often just simple, hand-twisted figures, but they reflected a deeply held belief in the protective power of the cat. The fortune teller sips her tea, and the finch flutters briefly before settling again. The cats resume their various activities, one chasing a loose thread on a cushion, another curling into a tight, satisfied ball near the hearth. The quiet peace of the tea house wraps around you once more, soft as a cat's purr, warm as the steam rising from your cup. And as you sit, the world outside seems to fall away, leaving only this small sanctuary of light, fur, and gentle magic. The soft scratch of the shopkeeper's broom against the tatami floor blends with the low rumble of a cat's purr, a kind of nightly ritual that signals the tea house is settling deeper into its evening calm. You watch as he sweeps carefully, not to disturb the tortoiseshell curled in the corner or the ginger Tom who now lounges belly up, his paws twitching in some private dream. As he moves, you notice a small chest tucked behind the counter. Its lid stands open, just enough to reveal a glimpse of color. Bright threads, folded silks, and something that glints like gold. Curiosity gets the better of you, and the shopkeeper notices your glance. With a chuckle, he beckons you closer, lifting the lid fully to reveal his secret stash: miniature kimonos, embroidered collars, and delicate little bells strung on ribbons no thicker than a blade of grass. The customers bring these, he explains, holding up a tiny jacket of indigo-dyed cotton, sized perfectly for a kitten. Some are gifts for the cats, others, well, I think some folks just like to imagine their cats as little samurai or nobles. You can't help but smile. The garments are absurdly detailed, tiny patterns stitched by hand, some with gold or silver threads glinting in the lantern light. A few collars are adorned with tiny charms: a fish, a gourd, even what looks like a miniature coin. Here's a delightful fact. During the Edo period, it wasn't unheard of for wealthy merchants or artisan families to outfit their cats in custom-made collars or small garments, especially for festivals or special occasions. The collars might be embroidered with symbols of luck or prosperity, and bells were often added, both as decoration and as a way to keep track of mischievous felines who might otherwise slip away unnoticed. The shopkeeper pulls out a particularly fine collar, deep red silk, edged with gold thread, with a tiny bell that jingles sweetly. This belonged to my mother's favorite cat. She said the sound of it meant home was safe. He turns the collar over in his hands, eyes soft with memory. Historians still argue whether these elaborate feline fashions were common practice, or more of a rare indulgence among the wealthier classes. But as you hold one of the delicate garments, a small vest of soft blue linen, it's easy to imagine proud owners dressing their cats for special visitors, or simply for their own amusement. One of the young women at the other table notices your fascination and joins the conversation. I have a friend who embroiders tiny poems onto her cat's collars, she offers, her eyes bright with mischief. The cat, of course, doesn't care, but the rest of us think it's charming. Outside, the alley is quieter now. The lanterns cast long, gentle shadows, and the sounds of the city have softened to the occasional distant clatter or murmur. The tea house feels like a little world apart, a place where even cats have their own wardrobes, their own treasures. You watch as the shopkeeper carefully returns the tiny garments to the chest, folding them with a kind of reverence. The ginger. Tom stirs, stretching luxuriously, as if reminding everyone that how fine the clothing. A cat's true beauty lies in its fur and its confidence. And then, with the faintest chime of bells, the tortoiseshell saunters over, her own collar glinting in the lantern light. She pauses beside you, as if inviting admiration, then flops down with an audible sigh, her eyes half closing in contentment. Here's a quirky tidbit to end on. Some Edo artisans specialized in making these miniature accessories for cats. Crafting tiny bells or charms with the same care they gave to jewelry for humans. There were even markets where such items could be commissioned, alongside goods for children or decorative items for the home. The shopkeeper pours you another cup of tea, the fragrant steam rising between you like a soft veil. They are our little nobles, he says, glancing around at the cats now dozing or grooming, or simply watching the night. And we are their loyal subjects, aren't we? You can only nod, lulled by the warmth of the tea, the soft sound of purring, and the golden glow of the lanterns as they sway gently in the night breeze. The tea house hums with a soft, almost musical quiet now, the kind of hush that invites reflection rather than conversation. You cradle your cup in both hands, feeling the warmth seep into your fingers, and glance around the room. The cats are scattered like living ornaments, each one claiming a favorite spot. The ginger Tom back on his windowsill, the tortoiseshell stretched long beside the hearth, a pair of kittens entwined like a single furry creature in the basket near the door. But tonight, this tea house isn't only a place for tea and silent company. There's a subtle excitement in the air, a flicker of anticipation. The shopkeeper clears his throat gently and produces a small, worn scroll. "It's poetry night," he says, his voice low and pleased. "The cats always inspire the best verses." Around you, the few remaining guests shift on their cushions, setting aside cups and sweets. The elderly woman with the calico straightens her posture, as if preparing to speak. The ink-stained merchant smooths a scrap of paper and lifts his brush. Even the fortune-teller in the corner seems to listen more intently, her finch silent for once, feathers puffed as it settles in. The shopkeeper begins, unrolling the scroll with care. His voice is soft, almost a murmur, as he recites, *lantern. Light flickers, whiskers brush the tea's surface, night curls at my feet. *, a gentle pause follows. Not silence, exactly, but a shared moment of appreciation. Even the cats seem stiller, their ears tilted as if they understand the reverence of the scene. Here's a charming fact. In Edo's merchant quarters, poetry gatherings weren't limited to scholars or nobles. Tea houses, especially those with a reputation for comfort and good company, sometimes hosted informal verse circles. Customers might compose haiku or senryu on the spot, inspired by the moment, the weather, the tea, or as tonight, the cats. The merchant offers his poem next, his voice light with humor, *, fat cat on my lap. I cannot lift my brush now, / ink stains all my sleeve. *, there's a soft ripple of laughter, the kind that warms rather than disrupts. You smile, imagining the very scene, the cat content, the merchant mildly exasperated, and the ink blot a small price to pay for such company. Historians still argue whether these poetic evenings were common at tea houses or simply a tradition that grew out of particular communities where patrons shared similar tastes. But tonight here, it feels utterly natural, as much a part of the tea house as the creak of wood underfoot or the steam rising from your cup. The elderly woman's voice joins the gentle chorus next. Rich and steady. Calico watches. Mouse dares not cross the threshold. Peace reigns for the night. And again, that shared moment of stillness. The calico at her side blinks slowly, as if in approval. You find yourself drawn into the rhythm, the cadence of the words mingling with the soft sounds of the tea house, the faint crackle of the hearth, the swish of a cat's tail against tatami, the distant murmur of the city beyond. It all feels like part of the same poem, one long, unending verse written by the night itself. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some cat-loving patrons of Edo tea houses were known to leave their poems behind, tucked under saucers or slipped between the pages of account books. Over time, a tea house might accumulate a small library of cat-inspired verse, a treasure trove of words woven from quiet nights just like this one. Outside, the lanterns sway gently in the breeze, casting their soft glow across the alley. The cats begin to settle once more, their interest in the human words satisfied for now. The shopkeeper gathers the scroll, his expression content. "Thank you, friends," he says quietly. "The cats will sleep well tonight, surrounded by such fine words. And you, too, feel the weight of the poems, of the night, of the soft shared stillness that binds this place together. You sip the last of your tea, the warmth lingering, and let yourself drift a little closer to the peaceful world the cats inhabit so easily." The lantern light flickers low now, casting gentle, shifting patterns on the walls as the tea house sinks deeper into its nighttime rhythm. The last of the poetry lingers in the air like a soft perfume, fleeting yet somehow lasting, woven into the very fabric of this quiet place. You watch as the Ginger Tom, clearly satisfied with his audience for the evening, stretches grandly and saunters across the room. He pauses at the merchant's table, accepts a respectful scratch behind the ears, and then leaps lightly onto a shelf where he curls into a contented ball, tail neatly wrapped over his nose. But here, in this tea house, it's not just the tea or the poetry, or even the cats themselves that draw people. It's the prestige that comes with being known as someone whose cats are admired, whose feline companions are the talk of the neighborhood. The shopkeeper settles beside you again, his tea forgotten for now. You wouldn't believe the offers I've had for that ginger fellow, he confides, gesturing to the now sleeping cat. Merchants, actors, even a minor noble once, all wanting to buy him, to claim him for their own tea house or shop. He shakes his head smiling. But no, he belongs here. And so do they all. In Edo, cats weren't merely pets. They could be powerful symbols of status. A tea house known for its beautiful, well-mannered cats gained a kind of social currency. The more admired your cats, the more admired you were. It was a subtle prestige, but in a city of merchants and artisans where reputation could mean everything, it mattered. Historians still argue whether this feline prestige was an organic development, born of the city's natural affection for cats, or whether some clever tea house owners deliberately cultivated it as part of their business strategy. Either way, it worked. Customers came for tea, yes, but they stayed and returned and brought friends, all to spend time among the cats. A man enters now, dressed in fine but not ostentatious robes, his hair carefully arranged, a fan tucked at his waist. He greets the shopkeeper with a polite bow, then scans the room, his eyes lighting on the black and white pair near the hearth. With quiet reverence, he approaches, kneels, and offers them a small packet, which releases the scent of dried fish. When opened, the cats accept the gift as their due, and the man settles nearby, clearly pleased to be in their company. The shopkeeper watches, a knowing glint in his eye. That one comes twice a week, he tells you softly. Says the cats bring him luck at his shop. I think he just likes to be seen here, seen with them. And you can't blame him. There's something about these cats, their poise, their quiet dignity, that makes their approval feel like a benediction. To be accepted by them, to share their space, is to share in a little of their grace. Here's a fun tidbit. In some parts of Edo, certain cats became so famous they were known beyond their immediate neighborhood. Shopkeepers might boast of having a cat descended from a particularly admired tea house feline, much as one might brag of fine porcelain or a master's calligraphy. Outside, the wind stirs the lanterns again, the soft chime of their fittings blending with the distant clop of a horse's hooves on stone. Inside, the tea house glows with a kind of quiet pride. Not flashy, not forced, just the steady, comforting presence of cats who know their worth, and of people who are wise enough to know it too. You sip your tea, letting its earthy warmth ground you, and find yourself thinking how strange and wonderful it is, this delicate dance of status and affection, where a cat's purr can be a kind of currency, and where a shared glance with a whiskered companion can raise your standing among your peers. And as the night deepens, that dance continues, as natural and easy as the rise and fall of a sleeping cat's breath. The tea house hums with the soft energy of satisfied guests and drowsy cats. Outside, the alley is hushed, save for the occasional creak of a cart, or the soft call of a night watchman announcing the hour. You shift slightly on your cushion, drawn deeper into the comfort of this place, when a murmur near the doorway stirs your attention. A pair of men stand there, their robes travel-stained, their voices low and urgent. They glance about the tea house, their eyes lingering on the cats, and particularly on the ginger Tom, who sleeps undisturbed on his shelf. The shopkeeper greets them with polite caution, and they offer the usual pleasantries before settling into a corner. But their tension is palpable, and soon enough, the whispers reach your ears. A prized cat has gone missing, stolen, it seems, from a rival tea house. A cat so admired that its disappearance has caused a small scandal. The shopkeeper sighs. Softly, his expression one of resigned familiarity. It happens, he says quietly to you as he refills your cup. A beautiful cat is a treasure, and not all who admire wish to earn it honestly. In Edo's bustling merchant quarters, where reputation was built on trust, charm, and sometimes the grace of one's cats, the theft of a prized feline was no small matter. Such an act could damage friendships, fuel rivalries, or even harm business. A cat wasn't just an animal. It was part of a shop's soul. Historians still argue whether these thefts were truly common, or if the tales grew larger with each retelling, woven into the city's folklore. But tonight, as the two men quietly inquire after the missing cat, it feels very real indeed. The shopkeeper leans in, lowering his voice further. I've heard of cats taken for ransom, held until their owners pay to have them returned, or stolen to bring prestige to another tea house. A shame. The cats deserve better than to be treated like coin. You can feel the unease ripple through the tea house. Even the cats seem to sense it. The tortoiseshell lifts her head, ears flicking toward the hushed voices. The ginger tom, high on his shelf, opens one eye briefly before deciding the matter doesn't concern him enough to interrupt his nap. Here's a quirky tidbit. There were whispered stories of cat nappers who specialized in stealing valuable cats, slipping through the narrow alleys at night with a lure of fish or a soft call, vanishing into the maze of the city with their prize. Whether these thieves were real or the invention of anxious minds, no one can say for certain. The shopkeeper straightens, his manner calm but firm. We've had no strays tonight but our own, he assures the visitors. If I hear word of your missing friend, I'll send for you. The men bow, offering thanks tinged with frustration, and take their leave, their shadows stretching long in the lantern light as they disappear into the night. The tension eases. The cats settle. The tea house breathes again, a slow exhale of peace returning. The shopkeeper pours himself a cup at last, lifting it in a silent toast to the room, to the cats, to the quiet that follows stormy news. You sip your tea, the flavor, now deep and familiar, and watch as the tortoiseshell resumes her nap, and the ginger tom dreams on, untouched by human troubles. In this small haven, at least for tonight, all is well once more. The door slides shut gently behind the departing visitors, and the soft chime of its bell fades into the hush that follows. The tea house breathes again, steady, calm, as if the very walls exhale relief at the restored peace. You take another slow sip of tea, the taste deepening as it cools, and glance toward the window. The alley beyond glows softly with lantern light, and somewhere in the distance, a shamisen strums a quiet, melancholy tune. But tonight, your thoughts drift beyond this tea house to the vibrant world of Edo's theaters, where cats too have left their mark. The shopkeeper, noticing your quiet curiosity, follows your gaze and smiles. Ah, the kabuki houses, he says, leaning on the counter. Even there you'll find cats, if you know where to look. Indeed, in Edo's kabuki and puppet theaters, cats-inspired costumes, characters, and even superstitions backstage. It wasn't uncommon for actors to mimic the movements of cats in certain roles, especially in ghost stories or tales of revenge, where a cat's sleek grace and watchful eyes could add a touch of the uncanny. You imagine it now, an actor on stage, his kimono patterned like fur, his movements fluid and feline, drawing the audience into the spell of the story. Here's a solid fact for you. The Bakoneko, or monster cat, was a popular figure in Edo period folklore and theater, a creature that could transform, speak, or seek vengeance for wrongs done. Some kabuki plays featured these shape-shifting cats, their performances blending drama with a hint of eerie charm. The shopkeeper chuckles softly. There's an old tale of a kabuki actor who kept a cat as his muse. Said he wouldn't go on stage without seeing her first, to bring him luck. He shakes his head fondly. Whether it was the cat or the actor's skill, the crowds always cheered. Historians still argue whether these feline influences on kabuki were purely artistic choices or if they reflected deeper beliefs in the mystical power of cats. But either way, the image of the cat, graceful, watchful, just a little otherworldly, became part of the city's theatrical soul. You shift slightly, picturing the bustling playhouses, the colorful banners, the hum of the crowd, the scent of roasted chestnuts and lantern oil, and somewhere, always, a cat. Perhaps curled on a costume trunk, perhaps watching from the rafters, perhaps even inspiring a scene that would leave the audience breathless. The shopkeeper gestures toward a faded woodblock print hanging on the wall, its colors softened by time. It shows an actor in mid-pose, his costume patterned with bold stripes, his face painted to echo a cat's sharp features. That was a gift from a patron, said it reminded him of our Tom up there. He nods toward the shelf where the ginger cat snoozes, blissfully unaware of his fame. A quirky tidbit for you. Some kabuki houses were said to keep cats backstage, not just for luck, but for practical reasons to keep mice from nibbling at costumes and props. And of course, over time, those working cats gained their own reputations, becoming mascots in their own right. Outside, the shamisen tune fades, replaced by the soft rhythm of the night. A dog's bark far off. The clatter of a closing market stall. Inside, the tea house remains a little island of warmth and quiet. The cats dozing, the tea cooling, and the stories of the city wrapping around you like a soft, familiar cloak. You sip again, the flavor now gentle, almost sweet, and let the images of kabuki stages and cat-eyed actors drift through your mind. In Edo, it seems, the cats were everywhere, in tea houses, in theaters, in hearts and stories alike. The tea house seems to settle even deeper into the embrace of the night, the flicker of lantern light growing softer as the shadows lengthen. The cats, too, have slipped into a collective doze, the ginger Tom still claiming his shelf like a throne, the tortoise shell at your side, so still you wonder if she's part of the tatami itself. The shopkeeper moves quietly, refilling cups, adjusting cushions, tending to his guests with the same care he offers his feline companions. Take a slow breath, savoring the mingling scents of tea, cedar, and the faintest trace of fish that lingers from the earlier feast. And then, as if on cue, an older man at the far table clears his throat and begins to grumble, not in anger, but with the weary tone of someone who has seen too much of the world's foolishness. "The shogun's edicts again," he mutters, shaking his head, as if cats care for laws. You glance toward him, curious, and the shopkeeper meets your eye with a wry smile. "Ah, the cat edicts," he says softly. "You'll hear about those wherever tea is poured and cats are found." Indeed, during the reign of Tokugawa Tsuneyoshi, known to some as the Dog Shogun, laws were issued to protect living creatures, including cats. Stray cats were not to be harmed, and in some cases, towns were instructed to care for them, provide shelter, and ensure they were not mistreated. The intention may have been compassion, but as always, the results were mixed. Historians still argue whether these edicts were driven by genuine concern for animals, Buddhist beliefs, or political calculation. Whatever the cause, they left their mark on Edo life and on the tea houses, where cats already held a place of quiet honor. The grumbling man gestures with his cup. "They said we should feed the strays, house them, treat them as we would our own. But who fed the hungry shopkeepers, I ask you? Who housed the apprentices who slept on the shop floor?" He sighs, but there's no real malice in his tone, only the resigned amusement of one who knows that cats, in the end, will do as they please, laws or no laws. The shopkeeper shrugs gently. "Here, the cats have always had a place, edicts or not. They earn their keep, they share our space, and we're better for it." He glances around the tea house, his gaze softening as it rests on each sleeping form. Here's a curious tidbit. During the height of Tsuneyoshi's animal protection laws, some city dwellers found creative ways to navigate the rules. There are records of petitions sent to officials complaining of stray cats or dogs causing trouble, written in careful, respectful language that masked deep frustration. And yet, in tea houses like this, the cats thrived, their status elevated. by both law and affection. Outside, the night deepens further, the alley bathed in soft shadow. The last of the market sounds fade, replaced by the gentle hush of a city at rest. Inside, the tea house feels timeless, a space where the weight of edicts and the chatter of politics dissolve, leaving only the quiet bond between human and cat. You sip your tea, now cooled but still fragrant, and find yourself grateful for this moment, for the warmth, the peace, and the soft, steady presence of the cats who make this place feel like home. A soft creak of wood draws your attention toward the back of the tea house, where a narrow sliding door stands slightly ajar. The shopkeeper notices your glance and gives a small, knowing smile. "Ah," he says, lowering his voice, "it seems tonight's gathering has begun." Curiosity piqued, you follow his discreet nod and rise quietly, careful not to disturb the tortoiseshell still slumbering beside your cushion. You step toward the door, sliding it open just enough to glimpse the room beyond. What you see feels like stepping into a secret world. The room is small, lined with shelves of lacquered boxes and folded cushions. At its center, a low table glows in the light of a single paper lantern. Seated around it are a handful of figures. Men and women of obvious wealth, their kimonos understated but of fine fabric, their manners precise and subdued. And at the table's heart lies a small basket, its contents drawing all eyes, a litter of tiny kittens, their fur still soft. With youth, their movements clumsy as they bat at each other with unsteady paws. The hush is reverent, as if in the presence of something sacred. The guests speak in low tones, admiring the kittens' markings, the way their little tails curl, the bright curiosity in their eyes. Here's a fascinating fact. In Edo, certain noble families and wealthy merchants quietly bred cats, particularly those with rare or admired traits, bobtails, striking calico patterns, unusual eye colors. These cats were not openly sold in markets. Rather, they were exchanged among trusted circles, gifted as tokens of respect or favor. Historians still argue whether these breeding gatherings were truly secret or simply discreet, known to those who moved in certain social spheres, but hidden from the wider city. What's clear tonight is that you're witnessing something few outsiders ever see. A woman in a pale blue kimono gently lifts one of the kittens, cradling it in her hands as if holding a delicate piece of porcelain. The kitten mews softly, blinking up at her, and she smiles, a soft, genuine smile that speaks of true affection. The others nod, murmuring their approval of its fine markings, its bright, alert gaze. The shopkeeper joins you at the doorway, his voice barely above a whisper. "They come here because it's safe," he explains. "A place to admire, to share, without the gossip of the larger world. The cats are gifts, sometimes, tokens of alliance or gratitude. But mostly, they come for the joy of it." Here's a quirky tidbit. There are Edo period letters that mention kittens given as wedding gifts. Their rare patterns or charming temperaments, believed to bless the new household with harmony and good fortune. The room beyond the door hums with quiet delight, the kittens oblivious to the weight of the admiration they inspire. They tumble over one another, chase invisible prey, or collapse in sudden, boneless naps, as only the very young can. You close the door softly, leaving the secret circle to their quiet joy, and return to your place in the tea house. The tortoise shell shifts just enough to acknowledge your return, then resumes her nap. The night outside remains gentle, the lantern swaying, the air cool and sweet. And within these walls, the bond between people and cats weaves deeper, hidden from the world, but shining all the brighter for it. You settle once again onto your cushion, the warmth of the tea house wrapping around you like a familiar quilt. The tortoise shell at your side shifts, blinking up at you with slow, contented eyes before resting her head on her paws, utterly at ease. Around you, the soft murmur of voices resumes, but now with a different tone, lighter, warmer, touched with quiet laughter. You glance toward a nearby table where two guests, a young man and woman, exchange shy glances over their cups of tea. It's subtle at first, the way their eyes meet and flit away, the way their hands hover just a little closer than necessary as they both reach to stroke the same sleepy cat. A soft brush of fingers, a shared smile, and the tea house's magic works its quiet spell. The shopkeeper catches your eye, his grin gentle and knowing. "Ah, the cats bring more than luck sometimes," he says, keeping his voice low. "Many. A match has begun right here, over shared affection for a lazy tabby or a bold little kitten." Indeed, in Edo's bustling city life, where arranged marriages were the norm and social customs kept interactions tightly choreographed, places like this tea house offered rare moments of informal connection. A shared glance over a purring cat, a moment of laughter at a kitten's antics. These small things could bloom into something more, unnoticed by chaperones or nosy neighbors. Historians still argue whether tea houses like this truly served as informal matchmaking spots or whether that's a romantic notion embroidered onto the past. But tonight, it's easy to believe. The young couple's stolen glances, the way the Ginger Tom chooses that very moment to hop onto their table and flop between them, his paws outstretched, it all feels like part of the design. Here's a sweet little fact. In some districts of Edo, there were sayings that if a cat chose to sit between two people, it was a sign of harmony to come. A cat's approval, after all, wasn't given lightly. The young man offers the woman a bit of dried fish for the cat, his hands trembling just enough to betray his nerves. She accepts, fingers brushing his as she takes it, and the cat accepts the treat with dignified laziness, as if granting permission for the courtship to continue. Around them, the tea house hums on, a world of its own, where such moments can unfold quietly, gently, without pressure or expectation. The cats, of course, remain oblivious to their roles as matchmakers, content simply to be admired, petted, and most importantly, fed. A quirky tidbit: there are Edo folk tales of cats who blessed marriages, their presence at a wedding, or their choice to sleep on a couple's bedding seen as signs of a fortunate union. Whether superstition or simply a reflection of how deeply cats were woven into the life of the city, the belief persisted, adding a layer of charm to every feline encounter. The shopkeeper pours you another cup of tea, the steam curling like soft smoke in the lantern light. "I've seen it often," he muses. "A shared love for a cat is a fine beginning. The rest ... well, that's up to them." You sip the fragrant tea, the warmth spreading through you as the night deepens. Outside, the alley is quiet now, the lanterns casting pools of golden light on the worn stones. And inside, the dance of glances, smiles, and soft purrs continues, a timeless rhythm, as natural and comforting as the steady rise and fall of a sleeping cat's breath. The tea house has settled into that perfect stillness that comes when night fully claims the city, a hush broken only by the occasional creak of wood or the soft sigh of a sleeping cat. You lean back slightly, your hands cupping the warm bowl of tea, and let your eyes wander to where the Ginger Tom now snoozes, his belly gently rising and falling. A soft snore, if it can be called that, escapes him. A small rumble that makes even the shopkeeper smile. You can't help but wonder what these cats dine on beyond the bits of fish and scraps offered by doting guests. The shopkeeper anticipates your unspoken question, his voice low and thoughtful. "Ah, their meals. It's not all fine fish and festival treats, you know." He gestures toward the Ginger Tom, who looks far too content to have any complaints about his menu. In Edo, cats lived at the intersection of domesticity and independence. Those attached to shops or tea houses fared well. Scraps of fish eel, skin, rice bits, and sometimes even leftover broth-soaked rice were their common fare. But they were also hunters, earning their keep by patrolling for mice and other small intruders that threatened food stores or delicate paper goods. Here's a solid fact: Edo's diet, rich in fish thanks to the nearby bays and rivers, ensured that scraps for cats were plentiful, especially in households and businesses tied to food preparation. And so, cats in tea houses like this one often dined like quiet little lords, their meals reflecting the city's own bounty. Historians still argue whether cats were deliberately fed particular foods to enhance their health and hunting skills, or whether they simply made do with whatever the kitchen discarded. Either way, in places like this tea house, the cats ate well enough to grow sleek and lazy when they wished, and nimble enough to earn their supper when needed. The shopkeeper returns from behind the counter carrying a small lacquered dish. He sets it down gently before the tortoiseshell at your side, who opens one eye just enough to assess the offering, finely shredded fish, with what looks like a sprinkle of rice. She rises with dignified slowness, stretches luxuriously, and then deigns to partake. He chuckles softly. She's particular, that one. Prefers her fish fresh and her rice not too soft. They each have their tastes, you see. A quirky tidbit. For you, some Edo families were known to set aside bits of pickled or dried fish, specially for their cats. And there are records of cats refusing food they deemed unworthy. An early example of finicky feline behavior that persists to this day. The ginger Tom stirs now, the faint aroma of fish reaching his dreaming senses. He stretches, yawns wide enough to reveal sharp white teeth, and ambles down from his perch with the slow confidence of one who knows the feast will wait for him. You sip your tea again, its flavor mellowed with cooling, and watch as the cats dine with the unhurried grace of creatures certain of their place in the world. The shopkeeper refills his own cup, his gaze fond as he surveys his whiskered family. Some nights, I think they eat better than I do, he says with a grin. But they've earned it. Outside, the alley lies quiet, the lantern's glow softening as the oil burns low. Inside, the gentle sounds of cats eating, the soft crunch, the delicate lapping, blend with the creak of wood and the faint rustle of a passing breeze. The tea house holds its peace, and you too feel nourished by the simple, steady rhythm of the night. The tea house breathes with a peaceful rhythm now. Tea poured, cats fed, guests lulled into a kind of shared reverie. But the night holds more layers yet, and as you sip the last of your tea, the shopkeeper's gaze shifts, thoughtful, toward the window. The lantern light casts soft halos on his face as he speaks. Not all our cats are with us in body. Some we remember in other ways. You follow his gaze, and for the first time you notice the small shrine tucked into a niche in the far wall. So subtle it blends with the dark wood and soft shadows. It's simple, but carefully tended. A tiny wooden figure of a cat, offerings of rice and fish, a coil of incense still faintly smoking. In Edo, as in much of Japan, cats were not only valued in life but honored in death. Cats that had served their households well, as hunters, companions, or simply as beloved presences, were sometimes given small memorials or shrines, their spirits invited to linger as protectors of the home. Here's a solid historical fact. Certain temples and local shrines were known to bless or memorialize cats, and small grave markers for favored felines have been found dating to the Edo period, carved with tender inscriptions and adorned with offerings. Historians still argue whether these cat rites were widespread or primarily found among wealthier families and artisan communities where cats were more than working animals. They were companions, muses, even guardians in their own right. The shopkeeper rises and crosses to the shrine, lighting a fresh stick of incense. The scent drifts through the tea house, soft and calming, mingling with the warm air and faint aroma of tea. He bows his head briefly, offering a silent prayer, then returns, his expression serene. That was for Tama, he says quietly. A hunter beyond compare, and a friend. You feel the weight of that simple tribute, the way love and loss intertwine in the quiet of the tea house. A tortoiseshell kitten, perhaps sensing the mood, climbs into your lap, her small body warm and solid. a reminder of the living thread that connects past to present. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some districts, it was believed that a cat's spirit could bring blessings or mischief depending on how well it had been treated in life. Families who honored their cats properly could expect protection from pests, bad luck, and even illness. At least in the folklore whispered over cups of tea. In places just like this, outside, the wind stirs the alley's lanterns, their light flickering like fireflies. Inside, the shrine's incense glows softly, the cats stretch and settle again, and the night deepens rich with memory, with gratitude, and with the quiet companionship of those who remain. You cradle the kitten gently, feeling her tiny heartbeat against your palm, and let the peace of the tea house wrap around you like a soft, endless night. The tea house holds steady in its deep, quiet rhythm, the hush so complete you can hear the soft patter of a cat's paws crossing the floor and the faint creak of the wooden beams overhead. But beneath the peace lingers a tension, a memory, a warning woven into the city's stories like a dark thread in a fine tapestry. The shopkeeper glances toward the door, where the night wind stirs the edge of the Norran curtain. There was a time, he begins softly, when cats too were caught in blame. You tilt your head, listening as he speaks, his voice low, steady, and touched with the weight of old tales. They said a cat knocked over a lantern, that a playful paw, or perhaps a startled leap, sent flame to wood, and that flame became a monster none could stop. He's speaking, of course, of the great fires that haunted Edo, the city of wood and paper, of narrow streets and crowded quarters, where a single spark could become disaster. One such fire, known as the Mairaki Fire of 1657, devastated much of the city, and while official records blame an unattended altar flame or kitchen accident, popular stories whispered of a cat, a lantern, and a moment's mischief that changed everything. Historians still argue whether these tales reflect actual events or were born of the city's grief, its need to make sense of tragedy by finding a culprit, even one with whiskers and a twitching tail. But the story persists, passed down in quiet warnings. Mind your lanterns, mind your cats. The shopkeeper sighs, his gaze distant. It's not fair, of course. The cats weren't to blame. But fear looks for an easy answer, and a cat's quickness, its mystery, made it easy to point the finger. Here's a factual nugget. After great fires, Edo authorities often issued new regulations about fire safety, banning certain building materials, restricting the use of open flames, even mandating fire drills. But the stories of cats and lanterns endured, embroidered into the city's folklore. The tortoiseshell beside you stretches, her tail flicking as if in silent protest against such accusations. The ginger tom stirs atop his shelf, giving a wide, toothy yawn that seems to say, "What, me worry?" And so the tea house breathes on, its lanterns trimmed, its hearth carefully tended, the cats moving through the space with the same grace and indifference that has always been theirs. Outside, the alley lies quiet, the wind gentle, the city beyond resting under the watchful eyes of its night keepers, both human and feline. Here's a quirky tidbit to end on. In some quarters of Edo, charms in the shape of cats were hung near hearths or lanterns, not as blame, but as guardians, little reminders that a watchful eye, human or otherwise, could help keep disaster at bay. You sip the last of your tea, the warmth lingering, and let the tea house's soft peace ease away the weight of old fears, leaving only the steady comfort of the present moment. The lanterns burn lower now, their light gentle as the first hints of dawn remain far beyond the horizon. The tea house, so rich with stories, sighs into its deepest quiet, and yet, beneath the peace, there's a subtle melancholy, the awareness that even such havens must change with time. The shopkeeper pours himself a small cup, his hand steady, his gaze thoughtful. There was a time, he begins, his voice soft, when places like this were everywhere, and then ... less so. You listen, the stillness of the room wrapping Around his words, the cat tea houses of Edo, these cozy corners where tea flowed, poetry bloomed, and cats ruled in quiet majesty, did not last forever. The reasons were many, like pebbles dropped into water, each one sending ripples through the city's life. With modernization came shifts in taste and fashion. The tea houses that thrived on simple pleasures and feline charm found themselves competing with newer entertainments, brighter, louder, more eager to dazzle. Theaters expanded, pleasure quarters offered more extravagant distractions, and the quiet, cat-filled corners began to seem old-fashioned to some. Here's a historical fact. As Edo evolved, so too did its leisure culture. The rise of large-scale entertainment districts and the increasing complexity of city life meant that small, informal spaces like these tea houses slowly dwindled, their customers drawn to the novelty of the new. Historians still argue whether the decline of cat tea houses was purely a matter of changing tastes, or whether it reflected deeper economic and social shifts, the pressures of urban growth, the tightening of regulations, the march toward the Meiji era that would transform the city entirely. The shopkeeper gazes at the cats, the ginger tom still on his shelf, the tortoise shell curled near your knee, the kittens tucked in their basket. His smile is gentle, touched with a kind of wistful pride. But here, we keep the tradition. For as long as we can, for as long as they choose to stay. Outside, the night air carries a faint chill, and the alley is as silent as a held breath. The lanterns sway, casting shadows that flicker like memories across the tea house walls. Inside, the cats remain, as they always have, indifferent to the changes beyond, content in their small kingdom of cushions, warm tea, and watchful eyes. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some of the last tea houses with celebrated cats became the subject of nostalgic poems and prints, their images cherished by those who remembered a quieter city, a gentler time. You sip your tea slowly, savoring the flavor, the moment, the companionship of creatures who ask for little but give so much. And as the tea house breathes its quiet history around you, you feel it, that thread of continuity, delicate but strong, that ties past to present, cat to human, one peaceful night to the next. The tea house feels almost timeless now, as if the slow turning of the night has wrapped it in silk threads of memory and stillness. You cradle your cup, letting its warmth seep into your hands, and gaze toward the door where the lanterns flicker. Against the soft dark, the shopkeeper sits quietly beside you, his tea untouched, his eyes reflecting the glow of the fading night. "It's strange," he says, almost to himself, "how far the whiskers of these cats have reached." And indeed, as dawn hints at the edges of the world beyond this tea house, your thoughts drift forward, far beyond Edo's narrow streets. You see, in your mind's eye, the bright windows of modern Tokyo, where cat cafes beckon with neon signs and playful mascots. The same idea, born in places like this. Tea, company, the gentle presence of cats, now dressed in glass and steel, welcoming weary office workers, students, and curious travelers. Here's a solid fact. Modern cat cafes, so popular in Tokyo and beyond, trace at least part of their inspiration to Japan's long-standing affection for feline companions, an affection that blossomed in Edo and earlier, nurtured by tea houses, shops, and homes where cats were both helpers and beloved members of the family. Historians still argue whether today's cat cafes are a true continuation of that tradition or a clever reinvention, blending old comforts with new urban needs. But as you sit here in this imagined tea house of the past, it's easy to see the threads connecting then and now. The shopkeeper chuckles softly. They endure, these cats. Through fires, through fashions, through the rise and fall of tea houses, they find their place. Always. Outside, the alley is hushed, the first faint blush of morning barely touching the sky. The cats stir, sensing the shift. The ginger tom opens one eye, blinks slowly, and stretches, his back arching in a perfect curve. The tortoiseshell lifts her head, yawns wide, and gives a few careful licks to her paw before settling again. Content for now. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some of Tokyo's modern cat cafes keep small altars or display charms in honor of the cats who came before, a quiet nod to the history that shaped them. A recognition that these modern spaces owe a debt to the humble tea houses of Edo. You finish your tea, the last sip cool but sweet, and feel the quiet pride of having glimpsed a thread of history that still lives on, not in books or scrolls. Alone, but in soft fur, in gentle purrs, in the way a cat curls up beside you and reminds you that sometimes the simplest things are the most enduring. The tea house, the cats, the city beyond, all breathe together as the night prepares to yield to day. And you too sit with that breath, held in the peace of this shared, timeless moment. The night lingers at the edges of dawn, reluctant to release its gentle hold. The tea house glows softly, its lanterns now little more than fading embers against the slow brightening sky. The shopkeeper moves quietly through the room, gathering empty cups, straightening cushions, his steps careful not to disturb the cats who still doze in their chosen spots. You rise at last, your body loose and warm from the hours of stillness, your mind wrapped in the soft haze of tea, purrs, and whispered history. The tortoiseshell gives a final stretch before resuming her nap, and the ginger tom blinks at you, as if offering a silent farewell, before curling again into his perfect coil atop the shelf. The shopkeeper joins you at the door, his smile kind and tired in the way of those who have watched over a peaceful night. The streets will be quiet still, he says. The cats will keep you company, if you like. And so you step out, the cool air brushing your face, the sky above touched with the first pale gold of morning. The alley stretches before you, familiar now, lined with shuttered shops and silent homes. But you are not alone. A stray appears, slipping like a shadow from beneath a cart, slender, gray, eyes bright in the dawn light. Another follows, a calico with a torn ear and a tail that flicks with curiosity. They keep their distance at first, watching you with the measured gaze of creatures who know their city well. You walk slowly, your steps echoing softly against the stones, and the cats fall in beside you, silent companions on this final stroll through Edo's sleeping heart. The world feels suspended, the hum of the city waiting just beyond the horizon, held at bay for these last quiet moments. Here's a final tidbit. Even in modern Tokyo, the strays of the city are often cared for by quiet networks of neighbors, shopkeepers, and temple keepers, a legacy of the bond between people and cats that took root centuries ago in places just like the tea house you've left behind. The alley opens into a broader street, the first carts beginning to rattle along, the city stirring from its slumber. The cats pause, their task complete, and with slow, graceful steps, they melt back into the dawn, leaving you to greet the day, lighter perhaps, for having walked a little while in their world. Now, as the city wakes, let us ease the pace even further. Let your breath slow, let your eyelids grow heavy. The soft glow of lanterns fades behind you, replaced by the gentle warmth of the morning sun, rising slowly over quiet streets. Imagine the cats of Edo, settled in their hidden corners, purring softly, guardians of memory and peace. The tea house. Door slides shut, its chime a last note of farewell, and the world grows softer still. The breeze is mild, the air sweet with the scent of tea and woodsmoke, and your steps slow until they stop altogether. Let the hush of the city at dawn cradle you now, as the first light paints the rooftops and the cats of Edo slip into the shadows. Once more, rest easy, knowing you've wandered a world where time moves gently, where even the smallest whisker leaves its mark, and where peace lingers like the last curl of incense in the morning air. Sleep well, dream sweetly, and may your night be as calm as an Edo alley beneath the rising sun. Greater than end of script. Sweet dreams.